Chapter 33 The Wild Boar. One morning, while 3 of my sons had gone off to catch beaver rats, of whose skins they made caps, I decided to go in search of a tree of a certain size that I wanted to make a grinding mill, and also to seek some more porcelain clay, of which I was also in need. I yoked steady to our old sledge, and accompanied by Flora and Turk, I set out for the wood beside the Jackal stream. As I neared the bridge and got my eye on our plantation of maniocs and potatoes, I was horrified to find it sadly destroyed by the ravages of some animals, evidently by the footprints of the hog tribe. These depredators had come in great numbers and had done a world of mischief, but there was not one of them visible on whom I could wreak my vengeance. Suddenly, however, the dogs began to bark furiously and were answered by a loud grunting. I ran and saw our own old pig facing the 2 dogs, surrounded by 8 well-grown pigs. Blinded by anger, I fired at once upon them. 3 fell, and the rest fled. I then dragged the carcasses to my sledge and went in search of my tree. I found one such as I wanted, 2 feet in circumference, the trunk straight and smooth. After having marked it in the manner of a woodman, I returned to our grotto. Our rat hunters had not yet got home, and my wife was alone with Ernest, who had been spending the day in the library. Towards evening, the wanderers arrived, Jack on his ostrich, followed by Fritz and Francis leading Tempest, loaded with 2 sacks containing 20 ortolans, a kangaroo, a monkey, 2 animals like hares, and half a dozen beaver rats. Fritz, besides, carried in his hand a bunch of large thistles, but the contents of the sacks in the meantime engrossed all our attention. "Oh, father, father!" cried Jack. "Was there ever such a courser as my ostrich? She runs like the wind. I thought I should have lost my breath entirely. You must make me a mask with glass eyes, for the rapidity is quite blinding." "Impetuous little man," said I. "No, I must not do what you want." "Why, father?" "First, because you ought never to say to your parents, 'You must.' And secondly, because I have other things to do much more important than the making of a mask with glass eyes for a young gentleman who can make what he wants for himself if he chooses." Jack was silent and allowed Fritz to speak. "We have really, father, spent a most delightful day," said he, "and see what supplies we have brought home. But we are willing to exchange all our riches for a taste of our mother's wine." "Each of you shall have some wine," said I, "for you well deserve it. But another time you must not go away from home as you did this morning without asking leave. And now unyoke your animals. A good cavalier always attends to his horse's comfort before he thinks of his own." When he met at supper, Fritz related the day's adventures, how he and his brothers had remained the whole day in the neighborhood of Forest Farm, setting their traps in different places, how with snares they had caught the ortolans and the beaver rats with little fish, and how afterwards they had dined under the trees. "But you say nothing of my jackal," said Jack. "He beat the cover for us and raised the hares and the kangaroos, which for the first and last time in its life smelt gunpowder." "In running about," said Fritz, "I found these large thistles which I thought might be useful in carding felt. Also, I picked up this little cinnamon apple and gave a lesson with my gun to this big monkey that would throw coconuts at me." His mother took the thistles and the apple from him, with both of which she was well pleased. The animals which they brought I proposed to skin by means of an instrument from the surgeon's chest resembling a syringe. I introduced air by an opening in the skin between it and the flesh, thus separating them and making the removal of the skin very easy. The children laughed greatly when I appeared among them with this strange apparatus, but their delight and astonishment knew no bounds when they witnessed the result of my experiment. "Wonderful!" cried Jack and Francis in a breath. "Father is quite a sorcerer." "But how is it done?" said Jack. Having satisfied their curiosity, I left them to finish taking off the skin, and as we had a good many animals to treat in the same manner, we had quite a day of it. Next morning we started early to cut down the tree I had marked the day before. Jack first climbed the tree to cut off any branches that might be entangled with the neighboring trees in falling. With a large saw we made a considerable incision all around, and then Pulling hard at the ropes which Jack had fastened, the trunk fell without much trouble. We soon cut off what we wanted for immediate use and left the remainder to dry in the sun. When one is not master of his trade, he makes no great progress at work of this sort, but I managed, after some difficulty, to construct a mill capable of grinding a little rice. Whilst superintending my mill, I noticed that our fowls kept going to the neighboring field with great eagerness, and returned with a very well satisfied air. The mystery I soon solved on going myself to the field, for there was our corn already near ripe. This discovery was very gratifying, for we were now sure we should have 2 harvests in the year. Next morning we went to the cornfield and began our reaping, and by evening had it completed. My wife, when she saw us taking merely the heads of the wheat and leaving all the straw and grass, thought we were very wasteful. But I explained to her that this was the Italian method of reaping. They leave the long stubble standing to protect the young grass, which is cut down afterwards for winter fodder. The treading out of the corn was a rare amusement for the boys. Each mounted his favorite animal on the occasion and enjoyed the work immensely. Their mother rather grudged seeing the buffalo occasionally regale himself with a mouthful of the precious grain, but I removed her scruples by quoting the text, "Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn." We added nearly 100 measures of wheat and almost as much barley to our store of provisions by this harvest. With a view to a second harvest, we had to sow again immediately. This time, however, we sowed oats and rye instead of wheat and barley. In the midst of our work, the shoal of herrings reached our island, followed by the sea dogs. Under the circumstances, we contented ourselves with securing 2 barrels of herring and a small number of the sea dogs, which were rapidly deprived of their skins by my newly invented method.